Welcome, brave soul, I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. Do you hear it? That sound. That thud, slow, deliberate, and patient. Like the heartbeat of something far too old to still be alive. Listen closely, because once you hear it, it never leaves you. No matter how many clocks you smash, how many doors you lock, it keeps ticking, waiting, hungering. Our story today begins with laughter. The kind of laughter that masks nerves, that fills the air a little too loudly as though trying to drown out doubt. Sally burst through the heavy oak door of Enigma Escape, Victorian parlor, grinning at her best friend. "Told you we'd make it," she said, nudging Louise, who clutched her coat tighter around her shoulders. "Happy birthday, Lulu." One last hurrah before the real adulting begins. Louise tried to smile, but her lips trembled around the edges. "Thanks, Sal. Just promise me no jump scares, okay? You remember 7th grade. Scout's honor." Sally raised a hand dramatically. "Just puzzles and tea parties with ghosts. Easy peasy." The attendant behind the desk didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. His smile stretched across his face, thin and unmoving. His voice was pleasant, but it carried a weight, like words rehearsed too many times. "Room 7, the widow's lament. You have 60 minutes. Enjoy." With a click, the door closed behind them. The parlor was lavish in its decoration, but the kind of lavish that suffocates. Velvet drapes sealed most of the light. A grand piano crouched in the corner, its lid shut, keys dusty. A mahogany table gleamed faintly beneath the dim shaft of light from a single grimy window. A tea set was laid out, porcelain cups waiting. But the most oppressive presence was the grandfather clock. Each thud of its pendulum filled the air, not just sound but sensation, a vibration through the bones. Sally clapped her hands together, forcing cheer into the silence. "Okay, birthday girl. First clue. Maybe something about the tea?" She picked up a delicate china cup and sniffed. Her smile faltered. "That's not tea. Smells like copper. And dust." Louise shivered. "It's freezing in here. And that clock, it's too loud. It's inside me." But they began the escape room game. They always did. The piano bench contained a hidden compartment, revealing a small brass key. The teapot lid bore a riddle etched into its underside. A loose floorboard near the fireplace concealed another clue. The room behaved like an escape room should, but the longer they played, the heavier the air became. Dust motes spun and curled, not random but deliberate, like they were being pulled by something unseen. Faint whispers skittered across the floorboards, too quiet to understand but close enough to feel against their ears. "Did you hear that?" Louise's voice was thin, stretched tight. "Hear what?" Sally tried to laugh but couldn't. Her eyes flicked to the portraits. One of them, a woman in black lace, seemed to wear a new smile. "It's just ambience. It's a spooky theme. That's all." Then they found the music box. Hidden behind a brick in the fireplace, its ballerina still twirled when wound. Sally twisted the crank and the tinny off-key strain of Greensleeves filled the air. When the melody ended, the grandfather clock answered. Not with the hour, but with a single, discordant bong. Every portrait turned its head. Louise gasped, stumbling backward. Their painted eyes locked onto the girls, unblinking, alive. The room froze in silence, their breath visible in the sudden drop of temperature. "Okay, nope. Nope, this isn't part of the game." Sally dropped the music box. It clattered, shrieking as the ballerina's tune died mid-note. They rushed for the door. The handle refused to turn. Louise slammed her shoulder against it, but it was immovable, as though part of the wall itself. "Fail-safe," Sally shouted, her voice cracking. "The guy said there was a fail-safe. They can't lock us in." But the room disagreed. The puzzles were no longer playful. The riddle on the teapot lid had changed. Sisters of sorrow, bound by blood, feed the clock with flesh and blood. The key from the piano bench now dripped with something thick and dark. "This isn't a game," Louise whispered, her breath fogging in the frigid air. "This is a trap. We were lured here." The clock chimed again, 12 times. But its hands were frozen at 3:17. Each toll carved deeper shadows into the room. The dust motes spiraled faster, condensing into skeletal fingers clawing at the wallpaper. The portraits glowed with faint, malignant light. And then, the ballerina in the music box twisted her head. Not danced, not spun, turned her head very slowly. Her painted eyes stared at them, painted mouth locked in silent horror. Darkness swallowed the last shaft of light from the window. The room became a void, broken only by the thud, thud of the clock. Not ticking. Not keeping time. Beating. Hungry. Louise screamed when her fingers brushed the porcelain face of the ballerina, cold, detached, rolling across the floor like a severed head. And that's when she appeared. The widow. The woman from the portrait detached from her frame, her lace gown fluttering though no wind stirred. Her smile was stretched, grotesque, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Her eyes gleamed with sickly yellow light. She did not walk. She drifted. The whispers rose into a chorus. Time is short. The clock must be fed. Sisters, sisters, share the dread. Louise clawed at Sally's arm. Sal, we have to go, we have to go. But every window was painted shut. Every clue mocked them. A locket containing a strand of warm, matted black hair. A diary page scrawled with talk of harvesting 2 bright souls for the timekeeper. The widow reached out. A hand, pale and skeletal, clamped around Sally's wrist. Her skin burned with cold. She screamed, the sound ripping from her throat raw and uncontained. The shadow hands erupted from the floorboards, wrapping Louise's ankles, dragging her toward the piano. The clock's thud became violence now, rattling the furniture, shaking their teeth in their skulls. Louise saw the truth in a flash of horror, the riddle's meaning. This was no test of escape. It was a ritual. The sisters of sorrow, she and Sally. Their terror was sustenance, their fear the offering. Sal. Louise shrieked. It wants flesh, it wants blood. No, we have to fight. Sally grabbed a candlestick, swung it at the clock. The brass passed through it like smoke. The clock answered with a hollow, bone-snapping crack. The widow pulled Sally closer. The shadow hands crushed Louise tighter. And the whispers hissed in unison, one to linger, one to feed the gears. Louise thrashed against the cold, spectral hands, her fingernails breaking as she clawed at the polished wood of the piano. The widow's laughter filled the room, low and wet, a sound that didn't just echo in the air but crawled inside their skulls, slithering through their thoughts. The grandfather clock struck again. Not a chime, not a bell, something heavier, more organic, a bong like the cracking of granite. The pendulum swung wider, its arc unnatural as if feeding on their panic. Louise's breath came in ragged gasps. Sally, she's going to take you. We can't win. Sally's eyes were wild, reflecting the flicker of the widow's sickly glow. She shook her head violently, refusing to give in. No, we're not their food. We're not. Her scream fractured into silence as the widow's hand tightened around her wrist, leaving an imprint, frostbitten blue, across her skin. The whispers swelled, 100 overlapping voices, hissing in harmony. Time is short. Sisters of sorrow. Feed the clock. Share the dread. The truth wrapped around Louise like a noose. The riddles, the diary, the key slick with blood, it was all the same message. They weren't meant to solve their way out. They were meant to give themselves up. But there had been something else. Something in the way the widow recoiled when Sally dropped the music box. Something in the way the ballerina's broken porcelain cut into her palm. Blood. Not offering it. Not willingly. But spilling it, breaking the ritual. Louise's eyes locked on the shattered figurine glinting near her hand. The ballerina's face was jagged, sharp. She seized it, ignoring the way the shadow hands constricted tighter around her legs. She brought the porcelain shard down hard, slicing into her own palm. Hot blood spilled, searing against the freezing air. The effect was immediate. The widow shrieked, staggering back as though struck. The shadows writhed, their grip loosening. The clock faltered, its steady thud, breaking into a frantic, stuttering rhythm. Sally gasped, hope flashing across her terror. Lulu, what did you do? Louise held up her bleeding hand, crimson dripping down her arm. Her voice was hoarse but steady. It doesn't want blood. It fears it. The widow's face contorted, her grin collapsing into a snarl that revealed far too many teeth. The portraits joined her rage, their painted mouths opening in a silent scream. The chorus of whispers fractured into a roar. Sally tore herself free from the widow's weakening grasp. Without hesitation, she grabbed the broken shard from Louise and slashed her own palm. Their twin streams of blood fell onto the key from the piano bench, staining its ornate carvings. The key pulsed, drinking in the blood as though it were alive. It vibrated in Sally's hand, humming with some ancient energy. The widow lunged, her form flickering like smoke caught in a draft, but Sally and Louise moved together. With one shared motion, they plunged the blood-slick key into the lock of the grandfather clock. It didn't turn, it just sank. The brass fused into the wood, vanishing into the grain as though it had always belonged there. The clock shuddered. The pendulum froze mid-swing, then fell silent. The widow screamed, a sound not made for human ears. Glass shattered in the portraits, splinters raining across the floor. The skeletal hands convulsed and snapped, retreating into the floorboards with a hiss like steam. For one terrible, beautiful moment, the silence was deafening. And then the clock stopped. It did not tick. It did not chime. It just stopped. The room exhaled. The oppressive weight lifted, but it left behind a raw, aching stillness, like the silence after a scream. Sally and Louise stumbled against the wall, clutching each other, blood dripping from their hands. The door handle gleamed faintly in the dim light, no longer fused to the wall. Sally reached for it with trembling fingers. This time it turned. The oak door swung open into a corridor. But it wasn't the lobby they had entered through. It was something else. The hallway stretched long, lined with more doors, each carved with Roman numerals. 1, 2, 3, 4. They marched down the corridor, their footsteps muffled by a carpet so old it was nearly dust. The air smelled of mildew and rot. The grandfather clocks stood sentry outside each door, their faces cracked, their pendulums swinging in lazy arcs. Every clock ticked out of sync. The girls staggered forward, desperate for an exit. But as they passed the doors, they heard them voices. Hundreds of voices. Screams muffled by walls. Fists pounding against wood. Pleas in languages they couldn't understand. Door 7 hung open behind them, the room they had escaped spilling its cold breath into the corridor. Door 8 creaked ahead, the faint strains of music leaking out. Another twisted game waiting for some other unfortunate soul. Louise's hand tightened on Sally's arm. Sal, it's not just us. It's all of them. Sally's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the endless corridor stretching into shadow. Oh my God, we weren't the first. And we won't be the last. They stumbled faster, nearly running now. But the corridor didn't end. The clocks grew louder with every step, a cacophony of heartbeats clashing against one another. And then silence. All the clocks froze. The air thickened. Somehow it got heavy. It was like someone or something was watching. A voice spoke. Not a whisper, not the widow's hiss. It was deeper and older. The foundation of the house itself. You stopped the clock. But clocks are not destroyed. Only delayed. Time is patient. Time is hunger. Time will have you both. The floor shuddered beneath their feet. The walls groaned as though the entire building drew breath. The doors slammed shut one by one, the sound echoing like gunshots. Sally and Louise ran. The corridor bent, twisted. Their lungs hurt so much, but they would not stop. Their hands left bloody smears on the walls as they searched for anything, any way out. And then they saw it. An exit sign glowing weakly at the end of the hall. The promise of salvation. They threw themselves against the door beneath it, spilling into the night air. It was cold and crisp, almost alive. They staggered into the street, gasping, clinging to each other. The building loomed behind them, dark and silent. The neon sign that had once read Enigma Escape flickered out, leaving nothing but shadows. They didn't stop running until they were blocks away, collapsed against a street lamp, their hands wrapped in torn pieces of their shirts to stanch the bleeding. The city was alive around them, cars passing, people walking, oblivious to the nightmare just streets away. But when they turned back, gasping, they saw only an empty lot. The building was gone. Where Enigma Escape had stood was nothing but overgrown weeds and cracked pavement, as though no one had touched it in decades. Louise wept, shaking, her voice a whisper. It was real. It was real, wasn't it? Sally didn't answer. She just couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on her wrist, where the widow's hand had grabbed her. The frost-bitten imprint was still there, bruised and permanent. The sound of laughter drifted faintly from the empty lot, so faint they almost convinced themselves it wasn't there. Almost. The street lamp buzzed faintly above them, the halo of its light trembling in the night air. Sally pressed her bleeding palm against her chest, her breath hitching. Louise's tears streaked her cheeks, but she didn't sob. Her face was slack, hollow, her eyes wide and fixed on nothing. Minutes passed before either spoke. "We got out," Sally whispered, almost to herself. Her voice was ragged, like it hurt to speak. "We made it." Louise turned slowly to face her. "Did we?" Sally frowned. "What do you mean?" Louise raised her hand. Her cut palm glistened wet, though the blood should have clotted by now. It wasn't dripping like a wound. It was pouring steadily, unnaturally, without pain. The crimson drops splattered onto the sidewalk and vanished before they touched the ground. Sally's stomach dropped. Louise, oh God, no. A sound rolled through the night. Soft and patient but familiar. A thudding sound. It wasn't the sound of their hearts. It wasn't a car or footsteps or anything of this world. It was the clock. The same deliberate rhythm. It was inside them now. Louise's voice trembled. Sal, it didn't let us go. It marked us. Sally wanted to deny it, but she felt it too. In her chest, behind her ribs. A second heartbeat. Slow but relentless and hungry. They staggered through the streets, half expecting the police to appear, for someone to ask why two young women wandered the city with torn clothes and bleeding hands. But no one stopped them. No one looked at them. It was as though they weren't really there anymore. By the time they reached Sally's apartment, the world felt distant, muffled. Every clock they passed, on buildings and shop windows, glowing digital screens, froze for a heartbeat as they neared, then resumed. They climbed the stairs in silence, their shared dread binding them tighter than friendship ever had. Inside, Sally locked the door and drew the curtains. They wrapped their hands in towels, though the bleeding never fully stopped. The silence was unbearable. Each tick of her wall clock echoed too loudly. Sally tore it from the wall, smashed it against the floor. The ticking didn't stop. It came from inside her. From inside them both. They sat on the couch, shivering, pale, staring at the blood-stained towels. The apartment felt too small, the shadows too long. And then, the air shifted. Not a sound this time, but a pressure. A heaviness that fell over the room like a storm cloud. Sally's breath fogged in the sudden cold. Louise clutched her arms around herself. The TV flickered on by itself, static filling the screen. Through the snow and hiss, words began to form. Letters scrawled in black. Time is not fed. Time is starved. Time is patient. The static flared, bursting into the image of a familiar hallway, long lined with numbered doors. Their stomachs turned. It was the corridor. The one inside Enigma Escape. The one they had run from. Door 7 hung open. And through the television they could hear it again. That thudding sound. Sally grabbed the remote, slammed buttons, yanked the plug from the wall. The screen didn't die. The static burned brighter, filling the apartment with a sickly glow. The widow's face appeared, flickering, stretched across the screen. Her lips peeled back in that needle-lined grin. Sisters of sorrow, her voice oozed, distorted, layered. You escaped the parlor. But the parlor is not a room. It is a seed. And you carry it now. The glow from the screen bled into the walls, staining the apartment with ghostly shapes. The shadows lengthened, familiar skeletal hands curling across the floor. The thud of the clock shook the windows, though no clock stood in the room. Louise clutched Sally's hand, her nails digging deep. Her eyes were wild, desperate. It's not over. It's never over. The widow leaned closer to the screen, her face impossibly near, until only her mouth filled the frame. The only way to escape is to feed it. The television exploded in a shower of sparks. The apartment plunged into darkness. And in that silence, the ticking grew louder. Not one clock. Not two. But thousands. An orchestra of timepieces, chiming and ticking from nowhere, from everywhere, filling the night. Sally pressed her hands over her ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside her skull. Inside her bones. She screamed. Louise screamed with her. And then, absolute silence. When Sally opened her eyes again, she was standing. Not in her apartment. Not anywhere she recognized. She was back in the corridor. The carpet rotted beneath her feet. The air reeked of dust and mold. The doors stretched endless before her, each with its Roman numeral. Beside her, Louise stood trembling, her face white. Door 7 creaked open again. Its black maw yawned, waiting. Sally turned to her best friend, tears running down her face. We didn't escape. We never escaped. Louise's lips trembled, her voice barely audible. We only moved to the next room. The corridor pulsed. The clocks ticked in jagged rhythm. And the doors began to open. One by one. From each door, figures stepped out. Not just the widow. Not just portraits. Dozens. Men in Victorian suits, women in tattered gowns, children with hollow eyes, each dragging themselves into the corridor. They were victims. And now prisoners. Players who had failed, their souls stretched and hollow. They all turned to Sally and Louise, smiling, waiting. The last door opened far down the hall. A massive clock face glowed within it, golden and eternal, its gears grinding with wet, metallic hunger. The voice spoke again, resonant, shaking the marrow in their bones. You fed me once. You will feed me again. You are not escapees. You are caretakers, sisters of sorrow. timekeepers of despair. The hands of the giant clock shuddered forward, both pointing at them. The pendulum swung, then made a thudding sound. The corridor went black. And when the lights returned, Sally and Louise were gone. Two new portraits hung in their place, framed in gold. Two young women, eyes wide with terror, mouths stretched into painted screams. Their gazes followed down the endless hall, joining the chorus of despair. Somewhere, far away in the waking world, Enigma Escape, Victorian parlor appeared again. Its neon sign flickered to life, glowing softly. A new online listing surfaced with discounted tickets, beckoning fresh victims. And if you listen carefully, on nights when the clocks tick too loud or when shadows stretch too long, you can hear it. That thudding sound. The sound of time hungering. The sound of the widow's parlor waiting. And if you hear it, you're already inside. Let us know in the comments, will you look at Escape Room the same way you did before?
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.